Edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and I've got a question for you. What do you think they're doing with your DNA? You know that 23andMe kit that you loved so much that you wanted to get for the holidays to find out who you were, and you sent that swab off to a database of people that compare you to maybe even 1 billion people around the world. But maybe there's someone who is very interested in your DNA because there's a Y chromosome marker that determines whether or not you are in the line of Aaron. Now, that may not matter to you, but it matters to those that are calling for the Messiah to return and calling for the one who knows and has said that not coming until the Jews cry out, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. And so this is the storyline, the plot line of a weaponized DNA being developed in the Middle East to wipe out the line of Aaron, the Levitical priesthood. Best-selling biblical thriller, now on sale. Second edition, first edition sold out. Second edition on Kindle for $2.99. I also want to encourage you to visit our website, ignitinganation.com. Click on special offers and you'll find the cover, a yellow cover of a book entitled The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. We take you on a journey from the natural into the supernatural right there in the Garden of Eden, looking at the ground all the way out to the fruit of the Tree of Life. You all know about being inscribed in the Lamb's Book of Life. Now you can find out about this tree where God reveals 7 supernatural truths to us and 7 lessons within each one of those truths. Visit us on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, every website that sells books, including if you're in Indonesia watching us, you can get it at your local bookstore, already translated into Indonesian. It's my delight to introduce you to our guest this morning, Drs Barbara and Michael Grossman, authors of the newly released book, The Marriage Map, The Road to Transforming Your Marriage from Ordeal to Adventure. Dr. Barbara's background is in psychology and theology. She's licensed as an individual marriage and family therapist. Her training included pastoral counseling with ministers who are cross-training in individual psychotherapy and marriage and family counseling. In addition, she worked with psychologists and psychiatrists in a hospital and group practice setting. Dr. Michael Grossman has been a board-certified family physician since 1976 to 2015 and is now a fellow of the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. He's practiced since 1978 in nutritional and preventive medicine, treated thousands of patients with an integrated holistic approach. Together they teach ongoing classes in Falling in Love Forever with Your Current Partner. These classes are held in their Southern California medical office as well as online, and you can find them at themarriagemap.com. Drs Barbara and Michael Grossman, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. It's nice to be here.
Well, thank you. I consider this to be Besheret, a divine encounter, an appointment, because I just finished 2 months of premarital counseling with a young couple that I'll be marrying at 5 o'clock this afternoon before Erev Shabbat. I have actually 2 guests today on the topic of marriage. How wonderful that I will be blessing them under the chuppah, blessing them with the Barakot Kohanim, all these things today, of all days, that I would have 2 back-to-back guests on the topic of marriage. So I'm excited because the wisdom that you share with me is wisdom I'll be able to impart even this day. So tell me how you 2 wound up in this place where we have doctors that would seem to be competitive, that would seem to be going down 2 different paths, and as you go down those paths, it's pretty easy to become divided along the way as you each pursue the academic and the intellectual pursuits and then the practical applications of 2 different sciences which happen to converge. I don't know who you want to hand off first and speak first, but I'll address Dr. Barbara first as to how did all this come about?
Well, you're right. There is a certain inevitability for conflict in a relationship after the honeymoon wears off. And if you want love in your life and you want a family that where you all feel connected and everyone grows into fine adults, you need to be intentional about your relationship. And so there was a time where our wonderful romance led to conflict and tension. And fortunately, we were open to growing, and we found mentors to grow with so that we could learn to respect each other and hear each other and develop each other. And I believe, being married is this amazing opportunity to evolve over a lifetime. You have your own personal development plan in your own home, because the inevitable tensions of two people who are true to themselves and also love each other, gives you a lifetime of personal expansion and reflection and unfoldment. So and that's what we've been doing for 47 years. We've been married since our 20s, and it's been one chapter after another of just delicious, important personal development and relationship connection.
What we can say is that Barbara and I have had 3 different marriages, as if. And so in the first marriage, we were 21, and we did whatever I wanted. And I set the whole parameters of how we were going to do things and what we were going to do and our priorities. And Barb was very accommodating. Then she's like 30 years old, back in graduate school, learning how to think for herself and make up her own ideas and have her own point of view about things. And that became a difficult marriage where you had as if 2 lawyers sitting there arguing with each other, having their own points of view. And that was very difficult. And that lasted some 4 years. And it took a lot of work and mentoring. We had to get mentors in our life and counseling and gradually begin to see, how do you have 2 independent people with their own ideas? How do you come together and join together? And that's what we teach in our classes, how to do that, practical skills that will allow that to happen.
You're describing something that the Talmud talks about 2 trees. I believe that there are a number of books written in regards to 2 trees not growing up in each other's shadow, but the straightness of the tree, the ability to have a separation, but still, when you build on those 2 trees, it's because they're both straight, they're both upright, they're both strong. They're firmly grounded, firmly rooted, and able to support the weight of 2 columns. So when you take a look at 2 columns supporting, even an archway can be supported by 2 columns. It's the strength of the span between the 2 of them that don't necessarily come together, but that picture is really quite interesting. I've found over the course of life that the relationship with God and the relationship with others is very similar, and that is that we become sandpaper and wood at the same time. Mm-hmm. There are high spots, and when the sandpaper hits the high spot, the one who's got the high spot cries out in pain because it hurts. But if we embrace the friction, the heat of that and not pull away, ultimately the sandpaper is no longer sandpaper and the wood is no longer rough. The sandpaper is now a polishing cloth and the wood becomes like ebony. It becomes beautiful and smooth. And this is what relationship, the coming together and the pulling apart, the coming together, pulling apart, begins to chip away at that. And I believe you have touched on this quite eloquently in your book as you approach it from almost like your practice, Dr. Michael, which was holistic in its approach, looking at both the natural and the supernatural of having a relationship with God. It was quite interesting how you came to that point. Was your spiritual journey, were you on the same page as far as maintaining who you were? I know that you, Dr. Barbara, you did pastoral counseling with ministers. Did you find that to be challenging from a theological perspective? Did you find that from, or was that mind expanding to embrace those that are New Testament believers?
You know, I chose that path because that's where my heart is. I believe that healing comes from a combination of human intention and spirit. And so I was in, you know, the company I wanted to be in, and I feel blessed by my studies and my commitments. I mean, you know, the personal growth is a spiritual path, and you know, I can talk secular language if a person needs me to, but I'm very happy and comfortable to speak the language of Judaism for Jewish people and Christianity for Christians. I think we share you know, the same source, and it's truly the source of growth and love. So why not contact the source on our journey?
Well, that's exactly the model God gives us, that God is love. Dr. Michael, in your practice, did you find that as you hit this period of time in the second phase of your singular marriage, that work was becoming more satisfactory to you than the home life?
Yes, absolutely. That is correct. And I think that happens very commonly for men. That men may love their work, may love their careers, and they get very involved with that. And the family life may take second place. And there's a quote from the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe that will explain this point. A king without a queen, the Zohar says, is neither great nor a king, for it's the woman who empowers the man to conquer his space, and it's the man who empowers the woman to penetrate and nurture hers. And then the man will learn from the woman that he too can reach within others and provide nurture. And the woman will learn that she too can conquer. So for me, being a man, loving my work, being committed to my work and creating a business and so forth, and I was so involved with that this nurture thing that Barbara was so into was like annoying. I had a lot of things to do. What this nurture thing is, it's just not that important. Why do you make it so important? And that was my frame at that point, which happens a lot to men. And we call this the warrior phrase, the warrior time of life, where you move out of caretaking into like accomplishing. And for Barbara, she drew out from me a whole process whereby I became more in touch with that nurturing side. And she pressed me in this way, not in a mean way, but it was like annoying. And then as I grew and learned and developed, she really was a key to my spiritual development, because I was so in my head. And the story that I tell in the book that I think is the very profound experience for me, when my father was passing away, I was about 36 years old, and he was dying of lung cancer. I loved my dad. He was a great dad. And I would go back to New York every week or two and visit him and be his doctor and try to help him to survive and get over the chemo and radiation and so on. And Barbara said, look, if you want to go back, you've got to be his son and stop being the doctor. And I said, well, what do you mean? How do you do that? What are you talking about? And she coached me how to tell my dad that how much he meant to me. And she gave me a whole week. We kind of practice it, because I couldn't, it was so difficult for me, because I never have done that really. And when I came in my dad's room, no one was talking. The nurses wouldn't go in the room. He was angry at the world because he didn't want to die. And then I said to my dad, Dad, I want to tell you how much you mean to me. And he says, what do you want? What do you want from me? And I was coached, and I said, I don't want anything. I just want you to listen. And then I proceeded to tell him how much he meant to me. what a great dad he was, how he taught me so many things about life, about driving the car and getting the machines working in the family store, and how to accomplish and create things and repair things. And then he was crying, I was crying, and it was a very, very tender moment. And then he changed his whole experience of dying. He called people in the room and he told people how much they meant to him. And he was like that for the 2 weeks before he passed away. And it changed my experience of being with my dad. It changed my dad's experience of passing away. And it really changed my whole life, because I began to be open to this whole nurture kind of experience. And that came from Barbara's pressing me. And that's what the Rebbe talks about. And that's what men have to learn in spiritual growth. They often get stuck in this one warrior phase and don't move on to this phase where you move more into nurture.
Dr. Barbara, you apparently identified a very common malady of men, and that is breaking the mold of this self-image of strength, what our Eastern European fathers raised us to be, being the post-Holocaust generation that we are. We were raised in a different world than the world of today. My mother's 92, and when my youngest sister got pregnant, she lived in Pittsburgh near my mother, and wanted my mother to attend a class, a parenting class with her, just to go along with her. And so they went to the class, and I called my mother and I said, "How was the class?" And she said, "Well, it was something that I really wasn't familiar with." And I said, "Well, what was it?" And she said, "You know, it was something that began with an N. It was it was just different than anything that I was familiar with." And so I said, "Well, hold on, let me conference my sister in and ask her what the name of the class was." And she said the class was on nurturing. And I said, "Nurturing?" She said, "Yeah, that wasn't the program of parenting in the 50s. This is something that's new," and you know, I listened to it and said, "You know, that might have been nice, but that wasn't the world we lived in at the time." So, Dr. Barbara, you have both learning and experience which shape who you are. Your experience with your parents might have been completely different than Dr. Michael's experience with his upbringing. How do you compare and contrast what you know of your two backgrounds?
Well, I'm the daughter of a single mother who remarried when I was 8 years old. And so I have a special appreciation for who a father is in a family. My stepfather actually adopted me, so he's actually the only father I have. And his, you know, contribution to me is you know, more than words can say. So it's important to me to teach the parents I work with to work together, to value each other's point of view, and to create a structure together. The most important relationship in a family really is the husband and wife bond. They're the partners in parenting, and it's important to have structure and rules and consequences for kids, so that that creates stability. It creates accountability. It's a platform for excellence and competence, and then when you're not doing structure and rules, then you can play and connect and all that, but there needs to be a backbone of structure and rules in a house. And I'm not fond of this over-nurture helicopter parenting that's going on right now. I think that will be a problem for our culture.
So how does that compare with what your observations were of Dr. Michael, your husband's upbringing, as you began to interact with your in-laws? How did you find, and the stories he shared with you of his upbringing, how did that give you insight into who he was and why you needed to weigh into his dynamic with his father? That was incredible.
Well, I don't know that it has to do with our family backgrounds. I mean, Michael's family is he's one of three boys, and it's a wonderful family. I've enjoyed being a Grossman. They're wonderful people. I think that it's a matter of when we grew up in the same generation. Actually, we're both from New York, so we have a similar kind of academic excellence orientation, and I think that at a certain point in life, we respect our parents. We need to comply with the rules, but there's a certain breakthrough that comes, I think, in one's 30s to start to become more authentic, to respectfully be honest and open, and so Michael was, he was while he had a certain kind of rebel stage, he's always been respectful to his parents and dutiful. And so my request of Michael, he was going to New York every other weekend. He was depriving me and our children of his presence. And my challenge to him is simply, if you're going to travel to New York so much, fine, but make it real, make it count, connect heart to heart. And that's what he did. And it was new for him. And I think it's a bit easier for a woman, possibly, though all women don't know how to speak from their hearts. But, that's an important stage we bring couples through in our classes, because you need to be honest and open in a way that builds relationship. And gratefully, he responded well.
Dr. Michael, when you first heard this message from your wife, and we would put it in the terms of maybe chiding you or encouraging you, hawking you, whatever it was that you decided to frame it, how was that for you to hear that you needed to move from the professional to the personal?
Our experiences of being children was different. I had a mother who was very intense and controlling, and my big struggle as a kid was to have some freedom and some space. Barbara's experience as a child was that she lost her natural father when she was 2, and she lost her grandmother when she was 8, and her mother remarried and moved out from the grandmother's house. So Barbara has this fear of loss, and I have a fear of being controlled and trapped. And that's what brings us together romantically. We're attracted to each other because we're so opposite in that way. And that also was what creates difficulty. And romance is like that. You're attracted to people who are like you, but also different. And so I always wanted Barbara to be more independent and stop being so emotionally attached. And she wants me to be more attached and stop being so independent. So that was a common scenario that occurs in relationship. And so I was always looking for space. And to have Barbara support my relationship with my dad, it was like a whole different way of experiencing the world. It changed my relationship to God, because prior to that, God for me was an impersonal force that I experienced when I meditated and prayed, and I felt connected to some beautiful, peaceful thing that existed everywhere, and it was impersonal. After my father died, I experienced whenever I would pray, I would cry. Whenever I would think of my dad, I would cry. And I did that for years, and I still do that. And my experience is that God is very personal. When I think of God, it's a personal experience that touches my heart. When I see people, when I'm with Barbara, I cry a lot because I'm so happy and filled with love. And so that's what Barbara adds on to my life, as I talked about in the Rebbe's description of life. It creates you on a whole different layer of life to have God be personal and to feel this overwhelming love. And that comes out of that. It was very difficult to move into that. And when Barbara is soft, I could listen to her. When she was screechy and scratchy, then it was very difficult. And that's what we teach in our relationship classes, is how the woman makes requests in a way that's soft and gentle, because the guys kind of turn off when it's not.
Well, we actually speak from two different points of view. Women are more auditory, men are more visual. I'm sure you've, Dr. Barbara, you've heard your husband say to you, can you see what I'm saying? And you would say to him, can you hear what I'm saying? All right? Are you listening? So he's visual and his expression is visual. Men say, can you see what I'm saying? Well, no, because I'm hearing it. I'm not seeing it. I'm not visual like you are. And are you listening to me? And are you hearing and understanding the Shema, the hear and understand, hear and obey? It's more of an active hearing than a passive hearing. We're talking with Drs, plural, Barbara and Michael Grossman, author of the newly released book, The Marriage Map, The Road to Transforming Your Marriage from Ordeal to Adventure. When we come back, we're going to dig into some of the principles that the Talmud actually tells us that the relationship between man and wife are the habitat of God's own presence. See how that plays out when we return from these messages. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere, and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Drs Michael and Barbara Grossman, co-authors of the newly released book, The Marriage Map, The Road to Transforming Your Marriage from Ordeal to Adventure. Drs Grossman, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
So, The Marriage Map, how did you come to this point where you thought, you know what, navigating marriage, if I want to get from Orange County, California up to the Sonoma Valley, I'm going to go to MapQuest or Waze or whatever it is I'm going to have, and it's going to create a map to get to that point. And marriage, I know that when I sign ketubas, when I counsel, we hope to impart a map, but I can't give them a map and chart a course from point A to point B for them. And so that's what you've done with the marriage map and with your counseling programs. How did you come to this point? Because it's not only practical, but it's incredibly creative.
Well, I've worked with couples for 35 years, and we've taught our course for 25 years. And from our own life experience, we had journeyed, and we were clearly not the same in every chapter. And it became obvious that there's a certain pattern of development that doesn't have quite the same timing for a man and for a woman, especially if a woman has children when she's young. And so we watched that for years. We saw that Michael became focused on competence and focused on his own individuality before me, and then he and I stayed focused on children and the household, and then I caught up to him almost, and then he went ahead and so there's it's hard not to notice that we're in different places in life, and it creates a different kind of listening, a different focus of concern, and it creates discomfort actually. And it just so happened that I was working with a very sophisticated model of structural development, and we talked about it for years and years before we started talking to our classes, but it really fit what's happening with men and women in relationship. It has a certain application that the couples need to know that we're in different places at different times, and we need to understand the point in life we're at.
And Dr. Barbara wrote her PhD thesis on faith development and psychological development and how they relate to each other. So this is some really original work that she did that was very profound, taking what has been the structural faith development kind of process and putting it on top of psychological development, seeing how do they relate. That was her doctoral thesis. And out of that came this whole idea of looking at how we develop over a lifetime, spiritually and psychologically in marriage.
I can add to that. In truth, my dissertation was designed as part of a conversation Michael and I had for over a decade, where he was meditating, and yet he wasn't a compassionate person. And so I wanted to prove that the quality of relationships had something to do with faith development. That it and so I took in a congregation I scored 250 people in faith development, very sophisticated inter-rater interview approach to assessing a person's development. And it incorporates like 7 dimensions of development. It's not just a psychosocial thing like Erickson, where you grow through life because chronologically you get there. It's a qualitative study of people's development. I took the high scorers and the low scorers, and I interviewed them to see how they scored it as faith development people, and or the high scorers and low scorers in Erickson's terms, and then I scored them for faith development. And my hypothesis was that that if you scored high in intimacy in the Erickson score, you'd also score high in faith development. Well, it turned out that that was a necessary condition for the higher levels of faith development, but it wasn't sufficient. There's something else going on in faith development that's cognitive, but you couldn't reach the higher levels of faith development without really good, deeper connections and growth in emotional connection and relationship. So I partly proved my case that you need to grow in the heart in order to have a deeper experience and connection with God. And so this is part of my my approach to convincing Michael that he needed to be more loving, not just meditate. And so that's how it was that that this is part of our conversation about developing people.
So my takeaway from what you're saying is that faith should be transformational, and faith should be a cornerstone that's reflected in how well you love. I'm sure that Michael loved you very much, but how well he loved you and his expression of love was expressed to you in not relational and connected terms, which was a fruit of a tree that was not, it was a tree, but it wasn't bearing fruit, and that he needed to work more on the application of faith. You know, the Brit Hadashah says that without faith it's impossible to please God. Well, God uses the things of the natural, like relationships, to reveal supernatural truths. And so without faith it's impossible to please each other. And without faith there is no connected expression of love. Michael, did you find that to be the case? And when you found that she said to truly take that heart of stone and replace it with a heart of flesh, not only did your interpersonal relationships grow, but your relationship with God now, as you stated, became personal, so you could become a personal expression of God on earth.
I think that's absolutely true. And what I would add to that is that there's an inevitable flow in life, and you can't skip the stages. If you are 16 and you want to have this big experience of life, you can't skip over all the inevitable stages that will happen. God has created this whole marriage process to be a process. You can't skip over it. For a woman, for Barbara, and for most women, when women need to grow in a marriage, they need to move at some point from being emotionally connected to being more independent, more self-sufficient, more in their mind where their intellect can control their emotions, which is sometimes the opposite of what a man is trying to learn, as the Rabbi has talked about that. So for Barbara, her process was to begin to use her intellect, her mind, to control her emotional life, so that she could think things out, and I won't feel like she's overwhelming me. And she learns in the process to not have her emotions overwhelm her. So that's what a lot of women have to learn, is how to think because women's brains are different than men's brains. A man's brain is very compartmentalized. You think with one part or another part. The right and left hemispheres don't talk to each other very much in a man's brain. In a woman's brain, deep connections, everything lights up all at once, and emotions and thoughts and all that are all going on. And a woman has to learn how to have the thoughts and the intellect control the emotional life. And that's a phase that women have to go through as the man has to go through his phase. And it's different. It's not the same necessarily for both at the same time.
As you look at these transitions, are they predictable? Are there signs that you're about to move into a new phase? Is it always conflict, which is the catalyst for, when I counsel couples, I tell them that the rose remains a bud until it's too painful to remain a bud, and the energy that's built up inside causes it to spring forward. The butterfly going into the chrysalis, it will burst forth when the pain of the cramping in that small space is so great that it has to break through. Is it always conflict generated?
No, it's sometimes it's conflict generated, but sometimes it shows up and it sounds like this. When a partner comes and tells me, or a couple presents to me, and one partner says, "We've grown apart. They doubt they should be together." And that's only because they're where they are developmentally is in a different place, and they don't feel as connected. And that's one of my purposes in writing this book, that couples don't misunderstand that. It's not. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be together. It just means you're in different places developmentally, and you want to understand each other. You want to share about it. You want to have compassion and support for each other, and eventually that will change too, and you will be on the same developmental place.
Now, what we can say is that the transition times between one stage of emotional, spiritual growth and another are difficult. It may not be arguing, may just feel separate and distant, but maybe there is arguing. But the transition times are difficult. Once you get to that new platform, things stabilize and gets a lot better. So we talk about in our book the map. So we have a map of growth that we have in the beginning of the book. And in the map, we describe that things start out when you're with the mother and you're sucking on the breast. It's just you and the mother. There's no separation. When you get to be 2, you feel separate from your mother. You're kind of like, I want it my way. And you have the terrible twos going on. You're separate from those you love. You get to be 5, 6, 8 years old. You love being part of the family. You're connected to those things you love. You get to be 13, 14, you're a teenager. You just want to have it your way, and you're separate from those you love again. You get to be in your 20s. You feel connected. You're in a new family, a new relationship, a new marriage, your own children. You feel connected again. You get to be in your late the 30s. You start feeling separate again. You want your own space. You have enough of this family stuff. You get to be in your 50s. If you've grown and developed, you can start feeling connected again. You're a grandparent. You love being around your family and so on. This movement back and forth is natural. And it's not always comfortable to go through those phases, but once you get to the new place, then you kind of recreate your world, and it feels a lot better.
Dr. Barbara, from what my takeaway is that your expression is that a lamp is still a lamp whether it's plugged in or not. But if you want the lamp to give light, it's got to be connected. And so the couples that feel that they've moved apart, your message to them is, look, a lamp is a lamp, but you need to reconnect it. It's just as beautiful and just as capable of casting light, but you've tripped over the wires so many times that it's become unplugged, and you need to plug it back in. Is this kind of an expression that resonates with you?
Well, you want to appreciate the rightness of each party. You want to be able to share what you experience, and there's a way in which the partner who's growing ahead can encourage the partner who is behind to move forward, and there's a way that the partner behind can encourage the heart connection, no matter what's going on. And in that way, even though we're in different places, we can support each other's evolution in life. We don't have to be in the same place to enjoy the fruits of relationship. It's I think people scare themselves when they don't feel as close, and they think there's something wrong, and they think it's going to be this way forever. And our message is that's not so. You want to hang in there. There's a lot of fruit in moving through this and growing together, and certainly as a and doing that will create ultimately a deeper wisdom about life, and it will keep our children parented by two parents under the same roof who love each other, which is a huge benefit for our society.
You and I share a common culture, and in our synagogues, women were separate from men. The men were the ones that made up the minyan. There was a different role, and it was encouraged that we take that role in our upbringing, and we become the more advanced learners. We became the ones who were, back in the day, there was no such thing as a bat mitzvah. There wasn't a provision for the women in the rabbinate. Times have changed, and growth has taken place, and things evolve based on time and space. But going back to your hypothesis and your results, you found that there was a direct correlation between faith and healthy relationships. And so in your relationship, how have you seen that impact you, and how does that impact the marriage map? Because that seems to be a critical component along the way, that you stop long enough to adopt a faith, to have a faith, to insert faith into the marriage, to find that successful path of understanding a relationship with something larger than ourselves.
Such a big question. When you love someone and they're different, and they're inevitably different no matter what, the kind of listening and understanding and acceptance of someone different, especially when there's a issue to talk about, we have two different points of view, to hold and respect two different points of view is so powerful. It's a paradox that 2 points of view can be right at the same time. And then when there's such an awe about loving someone, and in times when love just speaks of something beyond us all. But even in times when there are difficulties and it's hard to understand your partner, it becomes necessary, I think, to have a spiritual source where you can feel connected and supported when things aren't so easy. When you're all by yourself, you can validate yourself, justify yourself, and there's no compelling pressure to reach out beyond yourself. But for me, being married has been a spiritual path, because I've had to dig deeper for a love that is eternal, in order to keep sourcing my love from my marriage.
Well, what a beautiful expression. We have about a minute left, and I'd like to give Dr. Michael the opportunity to close us out with a message to the audience as to the benefits, what they're going to derive from the marriage map, and how this can radically change and dramatically improve the intimacy in a marriage that is moving from ordeal to adventure.
So our book, The Marriage Map, will show men and women the path that they will inevitably be going on to develop intense love for their partner and to experience God's love through their partner. And it's not a path that is easy and effortless. It's a path that is a challenge, and God requires us to meet that challenge. And that's what we inspire people to. And it's a big picture of what to expect. We teach classes and courses. We have 5 2-hour classes that we do online that give individuals and marriages the skills that they need to go on this path. So I encourage people to go on our website, themarriagemap.com, and look at what we do, and we invite them to enrich their marriages through that process.
Wonderful. Well, as you kiss your wife now for having such a wonderful interview with you, on the air for our millions of viewers around the world, at this time, I'm going to again remind our audience we've been talking with Drs. Barbara and Michael Grossman, authors of The Marriage Map, The Road to Transforming Your Marriage from Ordeal to Adventure. Visit them at The Marriage Map at marriagemap.com or The Marriage
Yes.
Map.
Themarriagemap.com.
Themarriagemap.com, and get a copy for you and turn your marriage from ordeal to adventure. Drs. Grossman, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your story on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring in the next edition of Revealing the Truth.